Well, welcome everybody to our webinar. I'm Nadine Armstrong. I am the consumer editor at Car Sales, and I'm also an ambassador for Motorsport Australia's Girls on Track program. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the land on the traditional owners of the land on which we're dialing in from this evening, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present. I would also like to say a big thank you to Michelin, who are presenting this webinar this evening. Tonight, I'm joined by Molly Taylor and Simone Landis, and they're talking about personal brand. Thank you for joining us, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Molly, you need very little introduction, particularly for this audience, I know, but so I'll keep this bit brief. A motorsport champion with a long list of unmatched achievements, not least of which was being the youngest and the first female to ever be named Australian Rally Champ in 2016. Since then, it's fair to say Molly's resume has exploded. Can I say that? Yes, beyond belief. Rally driver, motorsport reporter, TV host, competing in Extreme E on the world stage with motorsport royalty. She was our favourite reality TV star on SAS. She's a brand ambassador, keynote speaker, and among other things. Which also then brings me to Simone. Sim is the founder and director of the Lifestyle Suite. So Simone has over 20 years experience in talent management, now with a keen focus on health, lifestyle, and most notably sport. So Simone works on securing opportunities across the media, so with brands, speaking, events, partnerships, and building their profile, building a personal brand. Simone is enthusiastic about encouraging women in motorsport. So she's speaking our language. It's a keen passion of hers, and ensuring that their off-track activities only serve to provide them more opportunities for racing and with potential sponsors. No small task there, I'm sure. Simone is Molly's manager. Now, it seems only fair that we give the fans what they want first and foremost. I'm going to give you about 10 minutes, so it's going to be a condensed version, how it started and where we are now. So give the fans what they want up front, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, sure. Well, just wrap me up if you need me to. But yeah, it'd be a great opportunity to, I suppose, over the last few years, I've been involved in a lot of more high-profile series and events, but it definitely was not always that case by any stretch. And I was really lucky that my mum was a professional co-driver when I grew up. So that was my introduction to the sport, which was fantastic. But I didn't start myself until I was actually getting my driving license for the road. So never did go-karting or any of that stuff. So started fairly late along the journey, really. And then fell in love with it, as I'm sure you guys are all experiencing it as well. And I really wanted to see if I could make it a career too. So when I left high school and actually started uni, but I dropped out halfway through the first year, basically to work a few extra jobs so I could save some money, because I really wanted to go over and compete in a round of the British Rally Championship later that year. I thought that was, my best opportunity to go and put myself out there against the best young juniors in Europe, and that would be a stepping stone. So I gathered up all that cash and put the deal together and just rang around and introduced myself to people over there, and basically just cold called a whole bunch of people till I could put this together, and met everybody the night before the rally, which thankfully worked out. Don't recommend that necessarily, probably better to do
what
that.
Not to do.
Yeah, but thankfully it worked out. And I mean, I didn't go over there and do fantastically straight away. We got a puncture, I think on the second stage, and dropped a few minutes changing a tire, but we set some good pace and basically did enough to be noticed by the team, and they offered me a really good deal the next year to come over and do it full time. So I jumped at that, but basically packed my bags and didn't really know what I was in for, and moved to the other side of the world when I was 20, and just tried to make it work from there. So I was working in the workshop, preparing the car and trying to scrabble together whatever funds I could and whatever sponsors I could. A lot of that was in more of like a supporters club type of format. So like just trying to get a couple $100 from as many people as I could and sort of bring them in on the journey, and hobble together everything to try and make something happen. So we did that full season, and coming into the final round, there was essentially 3 of us that could win this series, and that this championship actually had prize money at the end of the season, which is fairly unique nowadays. So it was a big deal for me personally to be able to get the money to then continue. And we were leading the rally, so leading the championship, and then the fuel pump failed on the last stage, or the last day, and yeah, so that was game over. So at that point I thought I was coming back home, but a couple of weeks later the phone rang, and it was a Irish rally friend who was sort of friends of other Irish rally people that had moved out to Australia. So he said, I know so-and-so who knows so-and-so, and I've been watching what you've been doing this year, and it wasn't necessarily, the winning or the losing the championship, which I thought everything rested upon. It was watching all the other stuff that I'd been doing and the effort that I'd been going to in order to try and get to every event. And he basically offered me a free car the following year, which is pretty unheard of. And so then I just needed to put together everything to, buy the fuel tires and prepare the car and all that stuff. So it was enough for me to be able to stay in Europe. And that led, at the time, they had a Pirelli Star Driver scholarship that was in the junior WRC. And so I was in the right place at the right time. The tryouts came for that, and there were 16 people that were selected, and 6 made it through. So I was lucky enough to do that, which got me into the international, like the junior WRC level. Something that wouldn't have been possible at all without some sort of scholarship. And then things sort of led from there. And then at the end of 2015, I had the opportunity from Subaru Australia to join their factory team, and after about 11 years actually have it finally as a job, rather than trying to put every cent and sort of spend all my time living overseas and trying to make it happen. So that was a really cool moment. And I think probably the bit about all of that I'd love to kind of share about my story. There's been 1,000 ups and downs and stories and twists and turns along the way, but it was a case of putting myself out there and just doing whatever I could with what I had, and then just not knowing what that next opportunity would be, and recognizing that impact when people see you out there giving what noted that. And so very right, our career trajectory in a perfect linear format, but it really is in motorsport not like that at all. And it's about taking what opportunities come. Sometimes they don't come the way you want, but just making sure you're always there in the forefront. Which kind of brings us in a roundabout way to here. So how did I do? I think I went under 10.
So, I mean, it's fair to say things have moved on somewhat. There was a time when your name was exclusively, associated with rally driving. And while that's still your hero skill and your core passion, things have evolved, things have moved on. And that hasn't happened by accident. It didn't happen overnight. We know that. And it most certainly hasn't been a normal career path. We've talked about that before, that things haven't taken that there wasn't a stepped out process for you, which is where the expertise of someone like Sim and the Lifestyle Suite comes in. So we're going to talk about sort of three areas. We're going to talk about building a brand. We're going to talk about social media, but we're going to tread a little bit lightly there, because that almost deserves a webinar, a week-long webinar of its own, that topic. But we're also going to talk about working with sponsors. But first, Sim, I'd really love for you to explain how and why you came to manage Molly, and the kind of things you think about when you're taking on a new client, the challenges and those early days of sort of agreeing a strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And this might get quite awkward for Molly, because I'm going to talk about her like she's not here. But I first came across Molly when she was on SAS, and I wasn't necessarily looking to partner with somebody who was working in motorsport, but I saw Molly on SAS. I used to watch the show with my husband and my 2 daughters, and my husband and I would talk about Molly, and we would talk about how she just came across on camera as somebody who worked really hard, didn't cause any trouble, didn't bring attention to herself for any of the wrong reasons, but was really tough and could mix it with the best of them. And there was a steely determination to her. And then when I started exploring who she was, I looked at her website, I looked at her Instagram, I looked at the different things that she was doing, the commentary that I could see of her. And I think that's a really important point. I'm going to come back to that later. But the first thing I did when I first, I guess, became aware of Molly was to start to look at what was out there in the public domain about her. And the thing that struck me as I started to do more and more research was that Molly was the same everywhere I saw her. She was the same character on SAS that she was on her social media, and she was the same character on her website that she was as well. So I picked up the phone. I knew the person who had done the casting for SAS. I picked up the phone. I asked for an introduction. I was pretty excited after I learned more about her that she was as successful as she had already been in motorsport, and given my just personal interest in motorsport and I guess the real joy that I've had in my career in managing other athletes, particularly female athletes, it seemed that the stars were aligning. We were put in touch and we started quite a kind of a series of conversations about, you know, who we are, who the Lifestyle Suite is, who I am, what I felt we could do together. Molly had, to her credit, a heap of questions for me about the way that we worked and what a management relationship could look like, and how we might work together. And even in that, I was really impressed by that, because it showed me that she was very, very serious about her future and about making sure that she had the right team around her to allow her to be at her best. And so again, that was just, you know, we talk about red flags, that was a green flag. That was absolutely something that I kind of took into consideration. So we spent a number of weeks, months chatting.
I was in hotel quarantine. It's probably just prolonged because I just had nothing else to do.
Yeah, and we talked about strategy. You know, Molly did a great job of explaining her world to me. And I think that if I reflect on what I have learned about motorsport in the last 18 months, I mean, you know, it's incredible. It is an industry that is so unique, not like any other sport I've dealt with. And it's been a huge learning curve for me along the way. But I think that being able to really partner with Molly and understand what her plans are for now, for 2 years' time, for 5 years' time, for 10 years' time, we've worked really closely together to make sure that we're aligned on that, and that every decision that we make or every opportunity we consider aligns to those goals. Nothing is by chance. Nothing is haphazard. That doesn't mean that we don't make decisions quickly as we need to, because as you would all know, things move really quickly. Sometimes they can also move very, very slowly. But everything has to align, and everything has to align to her brand. And I know that's something that we're going to talk about a lot. You mentioned before, how do I select the clients that I work with? And for me, it's really important that the people that I work with know exactly who they are. They know who they are, they know what they stand for, they know where they're going, and they know that they're going to do what it takes to get there. And I think that's really important, particularly in an industry as competitive as motorsport is, and with, you know, although they are increasing, as few opportunities that there are in motorsport, at least currently. And I think without that kind of single-minded focus and an understanding of, I'm going to do what it takes to get to where I want to get to, it's a huge mountain to climb. So it was very clear early on that Molly takes this very seriously, and she manages to find that balance between treating this as what it is, which is a career and a job, but not being afraid to be real and authentic and vulnerable and exactly who she is. And I think it's that combination of things that has allowed her to succeed, together with, I mean, obviously incredible talent and skill, and real smarts about how she behaves and how she engages with people and how she treats relationships. Because, you know, we were talking about this the other day. Yes, we've been able to build new partnerships together, but in almost 90% of cases, it's predicated on a relationship that Molly has built over the last 15 to 20 years. And that's not lost on me. You know, this is very much, Molly will say, I know that person, I can give them a call and just see where we go to from there. And then maybe she'll bring me in at a certain point in those conversations. So I've gone all over the place with that, but I hope I've been able to kind of share with you, I guess, some of the reasons why we work together and also why it works.
Absolutely. And I suspect the qualities that everybody sees it, you're looking in at you, Molly, you know, however people see you, I thoroughly agree. And we'll touch on that being authentic a bit later, because I think that's something that really rings true, and particularly when we talk about social media as well. But I hear that quite a bit, and that steely determination, it's something that people need to succeed, I believe. Molly, I know that Simone approached you, but what did you feel like that tipping point was? You clearly realised that there was a time that, okay, it's the time that I might need a manager. What was the tipping point for you to think, yep, now's the time?
Yeah, I guess it's something that I've always wanted to be at the point where I had enough on that I needed some help. And that's been something that I'd been actively trying to do for a very long time. And I'd had definitely help along the way from people in the industry, but more of, an ad hoc, here's this opportunity, you're a good fit for this one thing, and one-off type of things. And I, had at some point tried to make it more, but motorsport is really tricky because the time it requires to be able to cultivate these things and see them to fruition, it's not a very easy task for a manager either. So rally especially makes that even tougher because it just doesn't have the general audience to start with that other forms of motorsport do. So firstly, when I got approached by Sim, I was a bit taken aback, like someone wants to work with me.
Hey, I've made it.
And I had been sort of working ad hoc with a few other people. And I suppose for me it was this. One of the things was, firstly, to kind of reverse Sim's situation, she came really recommended from someone that I had learned to really trust and respect. And then same thing, like the first thing you do is do a bit of research and see the people that she works with. And it's kind of some mutual kind of a bit separated, but sort of through second and third connections, you could kind of draw some parallels of people who knew people. And it was very, very clear, the type of work that she does and the people she works with. And, it was all really legit. It wasn't like some of these companies that might look fancy on the surface.
Yes.
That was the first thing. And then for me also an opportunity. I thought, we're in this motorsport pool and we're trying to get these, all the partners that are in the automotive industry, which is a very core part of what we do, but also there's so much more opportunity out there. And it was a real opportunity to work with someone with so much more experience on that side of everything, and the bits of the sort of internals of the motorsport industry that I knew really well, I can bring that to the table. So together, the scope's so much broader. And then we chatted, and it seemed like a great partnership. We were on the same page kind of from the get-go. So for me, it was a really special moment. I felt like it was a big step in my career. Like now here's a point where there's someone, formal and, exclusive capacity wants to invest the time in me as well. And, I think actually getting onto SAS Australia was a big point in all of that, because that was something that wasn't motorsport specific, and that's what opened the doors, ironically. So,
yes.
As I say before, you never know exactly how things are gonna work out in the end. But it was a very big moment for me.
Yeah. Sim, you've talked a lot about the building blocks when you develop and when you work with athletes in particular and sports people. Talk us through a little bit around what those building blocks actually are and how you piece it all together.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I kind of talk about this concept of your career, and particularly working with brands and being in the media. It's not linear, and I talk about this concept of it's almost like you're rock climbing. You don't go from the bottom straight up to the top. You're often sidestepping, you come across a hurdle and you need to find a different way through. And that is true, I think, for any athlete, but it is especially true in motorsport because there are so many hurdles that are in your way. And so by having building blocks in place, they are the things you can control. So your media profile, being really clear on who you are and what you want to achieve. Putting in place something as simple as a landing page for a website. So I'm not at all suggesting everybody should go and invest $5,000 or $10,000 in building a website, but for a couple of $100, you can actually build your own website. And what you're doing is you're putting out into the world that this is who you are and this is what you want to be if you're not quite there yet. And it gives people something to hold on to. Building blocks are your social media and making sure that what's on your social media is appropriate for that career that you want to build. Building blocks are the networks that you start to create, whether it's through, you know, groups like Girls on Track, or whether it's through the people that you meet at race weekends. And it's about cultivating those relationships as well. So, you know, not being afraid to reach out to somebody 3 weeks later or 2 weeks later and saying, hey, it was really great to meet you, looking forward to seeing you next time, because people remember that. And so the building blocks are the things that are within your power and that are within your control that you build on as your career grows and as your opportunities develop. So that's what I mean by the building blocks.
And in that, tell me, how important are things like transparency and authenticity? I think it's something that's very easy to become very exposed in this day and age. So how important is that?
Look, I think that this is a rule for life, not necessarily just for being an athlete or just in motorsport. I think that the reality is that with social media, we've all become our own mini publishers. And so with that comes enormous risk if we don't get it right. But with it also comes enormous opportunity, because you have the ability now to help people understand who you are and what you stand for in your hand with your phone. And that is something that's really only come about in the last 5 to 10 years. The challenge of that is that people also want to use that to talk about their personal life. And so I think one of the biggest challenges is understanding, I want to be who I am. I want to be authentic. I want people to get to know who I am. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to see what you're doing on the weekend if it's not related to motorsport or not related to something that that audience you're trying to cultivate will find interesting and appropriate. So, you know, some of the things that I say to people are maybe consider having 2 accounts. Have one account that is geared towards your racing, that is geared towards the industry, that still allows you to show people what you like to do. I mean, one of the things that I think Molly does really well, and she only has 1 account, but she manages to combine her racing, her motorsport, her TV career, so her hosting and reporting, together with her outdoor lifestyle. And what she's able to show people is her whole of self. But I know that there are things that she holds back, and that's about being open and honest, but not sharing everything with everyone. And finding that balance, I think, is really key, because people want to work with people that they trust and that they feel they know, but they don't need to know their deepest, darkest secrets. So I think it's finding that balance.
Yeah. And on that, Molly, I guess, you know, we do see a lot of you and we all feel like we know you quite well. We know Molly online, we know Molly, the race car, but how do you draw a line? And obviously with the help of Sim, but, you know, ensuring you get downtime, but you also get the privacy, which, you know, ties into that social media thing. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, I guess it's not something that it's like too labored or whatever. You sort of just get a general sense of what feels right, what is part of your sort of lifestyle, and you get to know your audience as well, and so you still want it to be interactive and be personal to a degree, in that, you know, it's not just the polished end product that you're putting out there. But yeah, I think it's more of, you know, I think as well, like you want to be trying to contribute in some way, in a positive way, to the whole space. So if something, you know, if you're out at a nice dinner or something, you know, like is that helping anybody to put the photo of that? And in my case, it's not really at all. So it's finding that balance, but I don't think it's something that is too strict or enforced. It's just more of a general feel. And I often I haven't done it in a while, but I remember sort of, you know, like early on when I was, you know, trying to I guess start working with some bigger brands or whatever, you know, you would go onto your social media and with a lens of, like, if I was the boss of XYZ and I went onto this page, like, what's my first impression, and kind of always having that at the forefront, that you want that impression to be true to who you are, but also something that, you know, ultimately if we're trying to work with brands that need to be a synergy and align with, you know, you don't want to be too controversial or anything like that. I mean, naturally, I suppose there's not a lot of that anyway, but yeah, it's doing that in a way that's not, it's not hiding who you are, but just, yeah, making it natural but useful.
Yeah, which easier said than done sometimes.
Well,
yeah, and on that, sort of having that ability to reflect and to look at yourself through a different lens, and Sim in particular, you know, the question of should we be Googling ourselves?
Look, I think it's a really important thing to do on a semi-regular basis. I think if you start Googling yourself every week, then we've got a problem. I think if you are trying to get a sense of how others view you or how a brand might view you if you're going to work with them, I think it's a really important thing to do, because it gives you a gauge on how others see you or what other people will find when they look at you. I think as well, people often say to me, oh, I don't have any followers, so it doesn't really matter what I put up. And I would absolutely argue against that. It actually, when a brand is looking at your profile, more often than not, they are not looking at the number of followers you've got. They're looking at the content that you're putting out, and they're looking at how others engage with that. So are people liking what you're putting out there? To Molly's point, is it relevant? Is it contributing? Because they're thinking in the back of their minds, well, we're going to have some kind of social amplification on any kind of partnership here. And do they get it? Do they know what we need to be putting out there in a way that works? So don't underestimate even small numbers. It's a really important part of who you are and what you're putting out there as well.
So I'd love to know more about Molly. You're 34.
thanks for reminding me. Yeah.
I can say that because I'm old now. How much do you think about, so in those initial conversations again, you know, how strategic were those conversations, and how are the long-term thinking? You know, you're thinking about sort of diversifying essentially. Are you thinking about retirement? Are you thinking about life beyond actually racing a car?
I mean, I think it's always something that you've got to be aware of, especially in motorsport, because you just don't know what's going to happen one season to the next. I think for me, like, we've just had so many balls up in the air and kind of trying for everything. It's a case of, yeah, trying everything. And then, you know, the good problem to have is then, you know, you've got to make a selection if you've got all these things, but nothing ever works out exactly. So, if, you know, for every thing that comes off, there's probably 5 or 10 things that didn't come off. And then, I mean, when the opportunity to do some pit lane reporting came up, it was more of a question of, you know, why not? Looks like fun. It can add value to any sponsorship I do for racing. So it will be worthwhile from that point of view as well. And then, yeah, I found it really enjoyable. And as you say, I think it's good to, yeah, get as many skills. I mean, there's things you learn from standing around the pits that can help your driving as well. And I think it also has to be something you enjoy. I think if you tried it and it wasn't for you, you know, there's other aspects of motorsport you can pursue if you want to diversify. So it's again something that kind of happened naturally. And I think and same even with, you know, Extreme E and the off-road things, you know, 5 years ago. I mean, Extreme E didn't even exist, so it wasn't on the radar at all. But, you know, you see these things come up, you think, yeah, that could work, that could be cool, let's give that a go. That led to Dakar. That's really cool. So yeah, it's kind of been open to these opportunities, knowing that you don't know where that could lead or how that could expand. But at the end of the day, it's also about trying to do things you're interested in and putting your hats in as many rings as possible to see what we can actually make happen.
Yeah, we talk about that things don't happen overnight, and we know that you have sort of been behaving quite strategically from a pretty young age. But what would be like the length of time, maybe the longest deal that's taken, you know, how long have some of those things taken to cultivate to actually get them over the line? And we don't want to, you know, put everyone off here, but I think it's good to know that some things do come, but other things may be like on the back burner for ages and might not be the right time. Or
yeah, I mean, well, it depends. If some stuff we're working on now comes off, then that will be quite long. But yeah, I think it's, you know, like it can be years and years and years. You know, like someone that I was speaking to when I first went over to Europe, where we're chatting to again now, and, you know, nothing has really happened since then, but now we're both in different places and there's a different, you know, maybe a different opportunity. So yeah, can take years and years. And then, you know, in another instance, I mean, more recently, we've got a partnership we're announcing soon, and that came about fairly quickly. They contacted me and it was like ticked every box in every way. And it was just such an obvious, perfect fit that it was like, yep, let's do it straight away. So it just, yeah, there's no kind of normal, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
Molly and I often joke that her career is a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. And sometimes you're on a total roll and all the pieces, you're finding all the right ones at all the right time, but more often than not, half the pieces are missing and you're not really sure where they are. And, you know, we have a bit of a joke about that, but it's kind of the way it goes. And probably more in motorsport than in any other industry that I've seen, because so many opportunities are contingent on others happening or not happening. From a timing perspective, from a brand association perspective, just from an opportunity perspective, obviously access to financing, not just for drivers, but for teams, plays a huge part in what opportunities they have available. So I think that one of the other key skills that people need if they want to forge a career here is that resilience. And to just know that you may not know what's coming, but you just have to keep at it, and you have to keep, you know, Molly makes an enormous amount
I've heard this pep talk a few times.
You know, she makes so many plans, and some of them will come off and some won't, and some will lead to other opportunities that we kind of never dreamed or thought possible as well.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what you're saying, you know, all those relationships, you know, nothing is time wasted. It's, you know, the conversations you have today may well come and benefit you in years to come, and Molly's character will, you know, keep her in good stead for those things, I think.
The other thing to add, and you kind of touched on this, Molly, before, is I consistently am surprised by the great interest in Molly's off-track activities. And it's really interesting to me, because obviously she's a stellar performer in the car, and that holds enormous value. But there is more and more demand to understand what Molly can offer off track, and the value actually that holds for brands. And I'm not just talking about the TV opportunities, it's about her other partnerships. It's about her investment in the industry, getting involved in things like Girls on Track, you know, getting involved in the rally commissions, you know, working with Motorsport Australia in whatever capacity is appropriate. You know, those things are really valuable to a brand. And the reason they're valuable is because they know that you're in it for the long haul. It's not just about the drive. It's about the fact that you've chosen this as your career forevermore, and you're prepared to invest in it, knowing that one day it will kind of deliver a return on that too. So don't think that some of these other activities that you involve with don't hold much value. They hold enormous value for brands.
Which brings us to talking around sort of working with sponsors and the whole, you know, making things commercial, and, you know, and having some of those awkward conversations. So, you know, Molly, you were probably doing things years ago for free, which now you're able to command a fee for, and having those really weird conversations about what is my value, what am I worth, you know, not only driving, but, you know, keynote speakers and that kind of stuff. How do you develop that?
Yeah, and that's something that is really tricky to find that tipping point, and to have that, you know, it still feels a bit like funny or weird, you know, when coming from yourself. But yeah, I think that's something that naturally grows, and I think it's always, and what I learned quite early on is, you know, there's this almost, when you start, this sort of feeling that maybe, you know, these people should sponsor you because you've got all this talent and you need to show the world what you can do. But the reality is they don't need to do that. And the world doesn't, you know, does the world need to see that? So it's really about how you can deliver more value than what you're asking for. And that can be through so many different ways, and kind of exploring and figuring out those ways. And I guess, you know, as Sim said, the more variety of things you do, the more different options you've got to spread, all of that. And then, at some point, kind of, sticking up for where you think you're at. And I think that's something that, like, that's grown a lot since I began working with Sim. And I'm sure if I did any of the deals that she's done, they would not be very good. So it really does help to have support in that way and kind of have someone else. But in saying that, it's not that it's not possible to do yourself. I think it's about, being able to really justify what you're bringing and what that is worth in a way that you can really, it's not just something that's plucked from thin air, and then being really fair and reasonable about it. And because there's plenty of opportunities that, might deliver you just as if not more. There's still things that we would do because it delivers a lot of value both ways. So that's just about being able to really appreciate what value is where.
And Sim, how do you talk to a client or a sponsor and that whole return on investment? How do you, evaluate that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I'm so glad you said that, Molly, that value is not always commercial. Value doesn't always have dollars attached to it. A deal can be immensely valuable if a brand who has a much bigger audience and reach than you do is prepared to share information about you and content about you, because they're growing your profile, and in turn that will deliver more sponsors and more brands down the track. So it's a really important point. The way that I handle it is I always put myself in the marketing manager's shoes, and I think to myself, I'm walking into a budget meeting, and let's say I'm asking for $10,000. How am I going to tell the team or help the team understand how that $10,000 is going to deliver us, or that $10,000 spend is going to deliver us at least the 10, and of course much more. And what that allows me to do is try to think through, how do I need to help that marketing manager position this in a way that they can't possibly say no? What are we going to offer them? Why would that be valuable to them? What audience will we reach for them that they don't currently have access to? How can we capture content that they can't get access to? And I think for everybody on this call, once again, you have that in the palm of your hand. You are at the coalface of what these brands are looking to do and normally have to pay a considerable amount of money for. So what can you be capturing that, assuming all rights are managed and all of those things, that they can piggyback off to attract an audience that you can deliver them that they can't get themselves without spending a lot more money? So they're just some of the things to think about. I think the key to it is put yourself in the marketing manager's shoes. How are you going to help them sell you? That's what they need to do.
Yeah. And how important is getting the right mix? I would imagine that Molly probably gets approached by a lot of companies, and there are probably some you say yes and others you say no. So how do you make that decision? And is that tricky, saying no?
I mean, I think it's a great problem. It's a great problem to have, to be in that situation. And unfortunately, that in motorsport, it's often the other, you're pushing a lot more than that come through. But so I would say that that's a sort of rare good problem to have, to be able to say no. But I think it comes back to what's that natural fit, and what you want to stand there and promote, and also how that would reflect on any other partners you do have.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think you need to do your due diligence on any brand that approaches you. And actually, I think we're going to share just a couple of questions that everyone should ask themselves sort of post this session. If you are going to be working with a brand, what are the questions you should be asking of the brand? Not directly to them. This is the research that you need to be doing. And then what are the questions that you should be asking of any proposed partnership? Because you need to know, as Molly said, that if you are standing next to a brand, that you believe in what they believe in, that you share values, that they've worked with people in the past and those people align with your values, and that you're going to feel confident and comfortable that partnership will exist well beyond the term of the partnership itself, because people will remember that you partnered with them in the past. So, you asked earlier, is it hard to say no? Absolutely, because, at the end of the day, this is a really tough sport to do without the financial support. So it can be very, very tough to say no to something commercial. But by the same token, if it's going to come back to haunt you, then it's not worth anything. And in fact, it can be really detrimental. And that's the decisions that you need to make after doing the research.
Yeah, I think we're seeing some high profile people making some decisions at the moment that, they're copying a lot of flack. And I think, yeah, like you say, it's something you really need to think about. The short-term wins worth the long-term, it could not be the right mix. Yeah. When an athlete is sort of managing their own brand, what are some of the things, if they're not engaging with somebody like the lifestyle street, what are the things that they actually really need to help do to turn that profile into something more commercial? So
yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think the first thing is control the platforms that you control. Don't let them be controlled by others. So, know exactly who you are, create a website, curate your social media, not so that it's overly produced, but so that it's appropriate for who you want to be and what you want to achieve. Understand your value, understand what you can offer a third party. Look after yourself. I mean that kind of wholeheartedly, in terms of your own self, your physical health, your mental well-being. Get the support that you need around there, because at the end of the day, you want to create a career with longevity, and consistency is really key. That's another thing that brands look at. How consistent have they been as individuals? And I think the other thing, and never underestimate this, just be a really good human. People only want to work with people that they really like, and people remember if an offhand comment, or people remember those things. And so I think it's really important to just always be kind and polite and grateful for opportunities. And I think the final thing is know why you're different. Like, what makes you really stand out? Being really fast in the car, it's not enough, to Molly's point. There's got to be more, and you've got to be able to articulate why you're different. And that's not something that you just click your fingers and can do straight away. That's something that develops over time. And, for anyone who's just starting to think about that now, you may not have the answer to that for another 12 to 18 months, but it's really worth giving it some very clear thought, and then testing it with the people around you, people that you know and love and trust, who will give you very honest feedback, because you're going to have to be able to shout that to the rooftops with great humility, but that is going to be what's going to get you ahead and get you the opportunities ahead of other people.
I think, and I know that we've got a lot of younger girls listening, girls from our Girls on Track community. So I think things that talking around those building blocks, but the analogy around the rock climbing, I think that's really important, because sometimes when you're young, you think you've got to have it all planned out, and it's got to be on this one pathway. And I think it's okay to know that doesn't always happen, and not to be set back if the next step doesn't happen as naturally as you thought it would. But surrounding yourself with good people, I think that is an amazing thing that people should know. People that can give you the support and tell you, keep you on track. I think that's really, really important, particularly in this social media age. One other thing I would love to know around the whole social media thing is dealing with negative feedback or trolls and that kind of thing. I think that's something that's, we can't talk about social media and not talk about that side of things.
Put the phone down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is tough, and we're human, and as much as you want to say don't read it, like, as much as you try not to, there's things that you might see. So yeah, it is tough, and if you let it get to you, it can. So I think it comes back to being surrounded by really good people, and having the people around you that you value, that will tell you how it is, and when it's not ideal, will tell you. When it is good, they'll tell you. So you're getting honest feedback from a place of people who know everything that's involved, know all the facts, and can be really truthful with you, even when it's not always what you want to hear. And that's really the most important thing, because you cannot control what people say. Similarly, you might get 1,000 people singing your praises and one person being negative, and you can't put so much value into that because you don't know their background, their story, why they're doing that either. So good people that you can trust and rely on. Like Sim.
And just to follow on from that, I mean, we do a lot of work with all of our talent around trolling. It's rife and it's horrible, and it shouldn't be acceptable, but it's just a fact of having a public profile. And one of the psychologists we work with kind of explains that think of the 10 people in your life whose opinion you really care about. And if the person making that comment is not somebody on that list of 10, then let it go. Just let it go. So I think that's a really nice thing to think about, because most people will be able to create that group of 10, and some may be future employers on that group of 10. Some may be your family, some may be your best friends, but it could be people in industry. But get really clear on who that list is, and if someone else comes out and says something, don't forget they are keyboard warriors that are sitting there, and it is much sadder for them, the ones who are doing it. The only other thing I would say is, if it's really vitriolic, just let it go, block them, delete them. There are all sorts of methods now that you can use to shut that out. But one of the other things that I think it's really important to do is actually to listen to what your audience is telling you. Your audience on social is often the best gauge of whether what you're putting out is what they want to hear. So I don't want anyone to kind of get really caught up in the number of likes or comments that they get. But if you're seeing the same people responding to your content and giving you comments of encouragement, do more of that. If you're seeing that people aren't responding, or you're getting comments you're not comfortable with, do less of that. And just take those cues from the people that are watching you and following you. But if it's nasty, just walk away.
Yeah, good advice. Priyanka, I can see you looking to, have we got some questions that we need to, we promised that we would take some questions. So have we got some questions?
Yes. We've got one from Bryn. So Bryn's daughter, Shrimpy, she was at Sandown, Molly, if you recall.
Yes, you remember?
So she's recently started her journey, and his question is, since she's just started out, should they take every opportunity that comes their way, so long that it's within their values, of course?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's an asterisk to that, that it's, it's the right thing. But yeah, I would say yes, it's seat time, any opportunity, no matter what it is, you're going to learn from it. You're going to meet people, ask lots of questions. I don't think, at that stage, I mean, even now, the amount of times, like very rarely will there be, an opportunity to go and drive something that, if it's within contracts and sponsors possible, that you would say no to, because it's all really good experience, and we know how hard it is to get seat time in motorsport. So go for it, try everything. You might find something particularly that you like the most, or if nothing else, you're going to learn so many skills from crossing over in all different types of disciplines.
And I'm just adding on to that, Sim and Molly, what advice would you have for someone who's 12 or 14 and looking to build those, sponsor relationships and get in the money to help with their motorsport career?
Yeah, I think, a lot of it is, I think, around those relationships that we've spoken about. For me at the beginning, it was trying to put together this group of supporters, and it was nothing that was really a huge financial commitment from every individual's perspective, but it was more putting these collective people together. And I'd put the stickers on the car and send them pictures, and send a newsletter every month, or a race report, everything, and really bring them on the journey. And for the investment they were putting in, that was, they were getting a lot of value out of helping that. And then, you can grow that to then on the commercial side. So that's a great way to start. It's a lot of work to put that together. But yeah, it's building those relationships. I think being really professional in how you do all of that, no matter how old you are. I think that goes a really long way. I think a lot of it is, turning up with a professional proposal, and, it doesn't have to be, thousands and thousands of dollars, but just something that's smart, to the point, doesn't have grammar mistakes, all those sorts of things. I think all those things go a long way.
Yeah. Sim, do you have anything to add?
I think Molly's covered it. I mean, start as you mean to go on. I think that's true of this. It's really interesting. Last year I was doing a bit of work and just looking at the market and elite athletes. And one of the things that really struck me is that there's this group of athletes, not in any particular sport, but they've set themselves up in such a way that you know where they're going. And I think particularly at that younger age where you might just be starting out, look at the people whose careers you want to emulate. Who are the people that you admire? What journey have they taken? Reach out to them. I mean, I think, I've certainly seen the motorsport community is an incredible one and a very supportive one. And I think that, if somebody has looked at Molly's career and thought, wow, I really admire how she's done that, then understanding the path and being on a session like this is really important. So start as you mean to go on. And, I kind of use this term, model the masters. Look at what other people have done and don't copy it, but understand the paths they've taken and maybe see how you can create your own along that as well.
Well, the good news is Shrimpy wants to be Molly Taylor, so I just got to connect them now.
She's got the perfect role model right there.
There you go. We've got to keep the questions coming in for those who are listening. Got another question from Talia, who's always very active with these webinars, so shout out to Talia. She wants some advice on how to appear keen in an opportunity, but not overly annoying. So she says she's always second guessing how often she should be checking in with mentors or people who are giving opportunities, etc.
It's making me laugh because the amount of time Simone and I'll have the conversation of, should we leave it another week, or should we email, or should we text? And yeah, that's not like one clear answer. I think for any scenario, it depends, and you've got to sort of be able to read the situation a bit, which you might learn from doing it the wrong way at some points as well. I think one thing for me is trying to be really soak up what their response is like and sort of read their body language or tone back to you, and you can get a bit of a sense. And I also found that like people really, they're much more motivated to help you if you approach them from a perspective of like, can you help me help myself type of thing, rather than just wanting help off the bat. Can you show me how to do this? Can you recommend this? And I think people come along, they want to help, and then I think it's far more beneficial that way.
Yeah, I think it's a really tricky dance, to be honest, because you want to appear keen and you don't want them to forget about you. But my rule of thumb is, do I have something new to share? Do I have a new race result to share? Do I have some content that I think would be of interest to them? Because if you've put a proposal in front of them and they haven't come back to you, I promise you they haven't forgotten who you are. And they just don't really have the opportunity then. So you either need to give them something else that's of value, or show them some other way that you can be of value, or you just need to be a little bit more patient because maybe they're trying to pull something together.
Probably one story I just thought of that's relevant to this, when I first moved over to the UK, and so I'd been there for that year, and then I was trying to stay on, and it was when M Sport were building this like Fiesta sport trophy one make car, and they just built a new one, and I put this sponsorship proposal together, and I'd had help to make it sort of look really professional, and I kept sending them the sponsorship proposal to see if I could get a free car or a discounted car to borrow or something, and so I sent them the proposal, and I'd come back and go like, thanks but no thanks, and then I leave it a bit and I'd follow it up, and it actually in the end they came back and said, like, we're not giving you a car, but we really like your proposal, do you want a job? And that's how I got my job at M Sport, which I had for like 4 years. And I went into the interview, I remember it really clearly because I went in and sat down, and the commercial director, who was really like straight to the point, was quite sort of, he was a lovely guy, but very just direct and quite intimidating, and I sat down and he said, well, right, why do you think you'd be good for this job? I said, well, I don't actually know what job it is, but I'm sure I can do it. So that was a really, it was a lesson. And, that was the opportunity to work at M Sport, which was, I could afford to stay there because now I had money to pay for rent and food. But then I was, surrounding myself, with the WRC drivers, the team. I could go to rallies and that led to other contacts, which led to other opportunities. But it was all, through pushing a sponsorship proposal, which ultimately failed, but led to something else.
Nadine, I'm going to throw you in the deep end. You've taken on mentoring role now with Girls on Track as well. So what advice would you have for Talia?
I think similar lines, that sort of one of the things we always talk about is to be curious, like ask lots of questions is always something, and in that, you can be interesting and be interested in what someone is doing. I think, be a really good listener. I think, the really good leaders and the people I see that are doing really good things are, above all, they're really good listeners. They listen to people, they understand people, but be patient as well. I think, things take time. It's really easy to be impatient when you're really passionate about things. So, have a checklist. I love making lists, have a checklist of things so you can be achieving things. So you do feel like you're making progress, even if it's little steps, there are things that you are doing to achieve. And as Molly was saying, there's a lot of little things that make up, that whole puzzle, a lot of little pieces that come together. So think about the things you can be doing. If you're getting no's, think about other ways that you can get a yes. I love a list. So think about the things that the questions you can ask, the people you can talk to. And as we said before, the motorsport world is so welcoming that I guarantee anybody that you reach out to, if you have genuine questions and be authentic, that you're really interested in what they're doing, they will answer you.
Perfect. Yeah, I think we always, some of the stories that have come out through the ambassadors is just don't give up, keep knocking on those doors. And like you've highlighted, it might take time, but the opportunities will arise. We've got one more question here. So someone from F1 in Schools team, and she is the marketing manager of the student team with not many ways to provide financial return on investment to a brand. So it's extremely difficult to gain sponsors. What is your advice on how she should present her team in a proposal and other ways to attract companies to get that money in?
Yeah, look, it's really challenging, particularly when you're trying to work out what you have of value to offer. One of the things that I say to people who are just starting out is try to build a media portfolio. So trying to create mentions of who you are and what you do in media, and then actually creating a portfolio of those links. I mean, even when we do proposals for Molly now, you've got to give people a sense of how topical Molly is, right? So we have links to every interview she's been on, every time she's been quoted. We send out regular media releases about what Molly is doing. Today we sent out a release announcing that Molly is going back to Dakar this year, which is amazing. And we need to keep doing that, even with the profile that Molly's got, because you need to be top of mind. So it's that dance again between being top of mind and not being annoying. And I think it's again about being current, being relevant, being interested, being interesting, and demonstrating what value you can bring. And then I think there are some kind of tools and tips, and I'm really happy to kind of take this offline, some tools and tips about how to put together a proposal that is going to be attractive to a third-party brand or sponsor, particularly if you're doing that on behalf of the whole team. So I'm happy to take that one offline as well.
Yeah, perfect. Please send us an email, girlsontrack@motorsport.org.au, and I'll link you up with Simone. Molly, Nadine, do you have anything to add to that one?
I was just thinking one of the other things that we've worked with some of the girls that we've been mentoring is that because they're young, a lot of them don't have a lot of work experience, and trying to pull together a resume is tricky. Trying to have a point of difference and to stand out for a job that you really want. And one thing we did with Sophie the girl I first mentored, we had people sort of be their hype girl essentially. So I spoke to a few people that had interacted with Sophie and got quotes basically about how they felt about Sophie. So it was almost like a character reference, but just in a sentence. And it did two things. It let Sophie know that she's great. And that this is what people think of you. This is how you are perceived, that, you know, you're doing a really good job. And it also, you know, validates for other people reading her resume, as there were some names on there that people would recognize that said, okay, well, you know, this is really good. She's obviously someone that has values, a really good work ethic. So I think there are lots of different ways that you can build your profile, even when you don't really have much, you know, the building blocks there. I think so that goes back to, you know, be a good human, be authentic, have a good work ethic. So, and then people will talk you up.
I think also, I mean, the F1 in schools does have a, you know, that's got a lot of brand value as well. So I think there's an opportunity to really use that as part of the value package, because that certainly is a very well respected program.
100%. I love this next question because it's all the way from India. So there's someone who's written here that she's working on building an all-women's karting team in India. And one of the challenges that she currently has is giving parents of young girls and some young women confidence in their career progression. So we've touched on that a bit. But what advice would you give young girls and women joining the sport for looking for a return on their time and investment? So just to give you some background information, because I'm from India, you're not really encouraged to play sport, especially if you're not going to become an elite athlete. So it's kind of like, don't do it, you're going to waste your time. So yeah, keeping that in mind, how would you answer that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the piece of, you know, you've got to enjoy it first, and that's that sort of satisfaction, enjoyment. I mean, in all of this has to be front of mind across the whole sport. Yeah, and I would say as well, motorsport is so much more than just driving. Like the life skills and the teamwork and the mechanical side, the sort of putting yourself out there, like there's so many skills that translate across to every other walk of life. So I think it's definitely, it's not just about the driving, it's about so much more. So I think that has a lot of value too.
I have a question, and it's something that I'm very good at talking to other people about and giving them advice on, but the whole imposter syndrome, I think, as you've done lots of different things in the last couple of years, if you say yes to things and you're not quite ready, or how do you deal with, well, do you ever feel that? And, for people that do feel that, I think it's a tricky one. We're always encouraging girls at the Girls on Track program to dare to be different and put yourselves out there and just say yes and worry about it later.
Yeah, I recently did a presentation that was essentially, a lot around that. And I don't think I think a lot of people struggle with it that you wouldn't realize from the outset. So yeah, having that confidence and struggling with that self-doubt, that's something that definitely I have and do struggle with. I think for me, when I went over to the UK at the beginning, and kind of the biggest lesson I learned at the beginning was like sitting at home in Australia, making all these phone calls, dreaming up this plan and putting it all together and going, yeah, this is great, it's going to be awesome. And then like arriving in the UK and going, like, I don't know where I'm going to go tonight. And sort of like, shock of, if I thought about it, that like, if in that moment they said, do you want to do it? I would have been like, no, I want to go home right now. So that was kind of like the strategy of pragmatically thinking about, where do I want to be? What is that going to require? Is it going to require me doing this, even though I might find it really uncomfortable? And if the answer's yes, I mean, as long as it's something that you ultimately think is worthwhile, committing. So I would, commit and say yes to things that you were at least sort of a bit more emotionally detached from it at that point. But then when the moment came around, you're like, oh, Jesus, that was, why did I say yes to that? But then you've got no choice but to kind of get on with it, and then learning through that what you can do. So I found that to be like helpful from my perspective. And then also the other important thing is, in those moments when you do feel like that as well, just focusing on physically what you need to do that like sort of one step in front of the other mentality, and just trying to put all your energy into physically, I'm getting in the car now, I'm putting on my seatbelt now, I'm doing this, and then you're in that moment and it'll come, and you won't be distracted by any of that, which I mean, that's not easy to do, but that's what the focus should be in those moments.
Sim, I'd imagine that you would encounter that sometimes when you're working with new clients, maybe who are doing new things, you know, pushing themselves in different ways.
Working with old clients who have been doing it for 20 years. You know, I think it's just, I think imposter syndrome is very real, and I think it's a sign that you really want it. And so I think, you know, Molly's advice is one foot in front of the other. You know, how do you eat an elephant? Piece by piece, just break it down. Don't think about the end result. Just think about what you need to do in the moment, because I think that end result piece is what causes that overwhelm that drives that imposter syndrome. So yeah, I think, you know, all of Molly's advice there is absolutely spot on. And also talk, like what you said, talk to the people around you who can often see the value in you that you can't see yourself, and have them help you understand that actually you're not an imposter at all. And then the other thing is just like, you always want to be in an environment where people are stronger than you, better than you, because that's, to your point, Molly, where you learn. It's no point being in a room where you're better than everyone else. Surely that's the way you want it to be on a race weekend. But generally, you want to put yourself in situations and positions where you can learn from the people around you. So also really good advice.
How are we going, Priyanka?
We don't have any more questions.
Yeah, it's almost time to wrap up. I think there are so many common themes, every one of these building blocks that we've talked of, and a lot of that comes back to surrounding yourself with really good people and understanding your own value and your own worth and your own story. And that sort of, you know, real basics that feel like, you know, things that we should know, common sense about being authentic and being ethical and show up, turn up, do a good job, and try and look at yourself through the lens of somebody else that you'll potentially want to work for, or that, you know, if somebody's asking you to fork over thousands of dollars, you know, what would seal that deal? I think it's easy to get caught up in the, you know, what can you do for me, but what can I do for you is the bigger question potentially. So, you know, be a really good listener. Understand that it's going to be a tricky path, and particularly if you're in motorsport, it's not going to be a traditional path. We have a lot of references for our Girls on Track community at motorsport.org.au. There are a heap of references on there. Go to the lifestylesuite.com and you'll see Simone and her team there, and also mollytaylor.com, of course. And Sim has kindly offered to give us some practical guidance after this. So everybody that has registered will receive a working document that will help them have, you know, ask some of those questions about, you know, who should I say yes to or no to, and what is my brand about. So thank you, Sim. We really appreciate that. I think to leave people with something, you know, quite tangible that they can go and do something to further their thinking, their career, whatever that is, that's really helpful. And that's what we really want to do, sort of help the girls move forward. So I thank you for that. So that will be emailed to everybody. Thank you, Molly and Sim. I can't thank you enough. You know, you've spent hours, and I'm sure we could talk for ages. And I think we are going to have another webinar at some stage talking about social media, because it really is a black hole of, yeah. So, and I'm going to make my children listen to that one.
Well, thank you as well, Nadine and Priyanka, for putting this on.
Thanks so much for having the opportunity to be involved, guys. Thank you.
That was amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much from everyone at Girls on Track and Motorsport Australia.
Don't forget, motorsport.org.au, Girls on Track, all of the information is in there.